Welcome to Reformed Thinking. So, I want you to just imagine stepping out of a time machine and finding yourself standing right in the middle of modern day Times Square.
Oh, wow.
Or maybe, Shibuya Crossing in Tokyo. You look up and you are just entirely surrounded by thousands of massive glowing billboards.
It's complete sensory overload.
Exactly.
Huh?
Every single screen, every piece of neon is just screaming for your attention. And they're all selling a different lifestyle, a different philosophy, a different ultimate good.
Right.
You've got advertisements promising you that consumerism will bring you peace. And then right next to it, you've got screens telling you that political power is your only salvation.
It really is like you're drowning in a sea of competing altars, isn't it?
It is. It's an incredibly overwhelming sensory and spiritual experience. You are essentially standing at the intersection of 100 different worldviews, and they are all just colliding in real time.
And, that is exactly what it feels like to navigate the modern world today.
Yeah, we live in this hyper-connected digital reality where global forces and highly specific local cultures are just constantly crashing into each other.
You don't even have to travel across an ocean to encounter a completely foreign worldview anymore.
No, not at all. You literally just have to open your smartphone.
Right. Which creates this massive tension for anyone trying to hold on to historic Orthodox Christianity.
Which is exactly why we are doing this deep dive today, because the question is, how do you share an unchanging absolute truth in an environment that is so fragmented?
And so incredibly pluralistic.
Right, and it's constantly shifting under your feet. How do you adapt your communication without losing your soul?
I'd say that is the defining missiological challenge of our generation.
Mm-hmm.
We are really trying to figure out how to mediate the gospel in spaces that are just increasingly hostile to the very concept of absolute truth.
So to figure out how we actually survive and thrive in this landscape, we are diving deep into two comprehensive missiological texts today, and they both focus heavily on this idea of glocal mediation.
Glocal, yeah. Such a key term in these sources.
But we aren't just looking at modern theory here. We're going to anchor this entire conversation in one specific historical moment that serves as like the ultimate blueprint for this exact kind of cultural collision.
We are going back to the first century.
We are. We're looking at the Apostle Paul's masterclass in cultural engagement when he walked right into the intellectual epicenter of the ancient world.
Athens.
Athens, Acts chapter 17.
If you want to know how to navigate the digital Times Square of the modern era, you really have to study how Paul navigated the philosophical marketplace of the Greco-Roman world.
Because it is the exact same dynamic.
Completely.
But, before you walk the streets of Athens, we really have to understand how dramatically the landscape of global missions has actually changed.
Right, because the mental map that most of us grew up with is basically completely obsolete.
Yeah, for a couple of centuries, like from the 1700s well into the 1900s, missions was defined almost entirely by geography. It was unidirectional.
Fundamentally geographic. When you look at the architecture of the modern missionary movement, spearheaded by pioneers like William Kelly
Or Bartholomew Higginbotham.
Exactly. The entire organizing principle was about crossing physical space.
Right.
You had highly resourced, culturally confident missionaries leaving the quote-unquote Christianized West, places like London or New England.
Boarding ships and spending months traveling.
Yeah, traveling to the unevangelized frontiers in Africa, Asia, or South America.
It was basically a one-way transatlantic or trans-Pacific flight. You packed up your theology, your cultural assumptions, your hymns, your institutional structures, and you just exported them from the West to the rest of the world.
And to be fair, by the sovereign grace of God, that geographic movement bore incredible fruit.
Oh, absolutely. It established indigenous churches all over the globe. But the texts we're looking at today highlight a staggering demographic inversion that has happened since then.
The map has entirely flipped. Entirely.
Yeah. The heartland of Christian vitality is no longer found in Western Europe or North America.
No, those regions have rapidly secularized. Today, the most vibrant, theological, and demographically expansive centers of the faith are in sub-Saharan Africa, South America, China, and Korea.
The sender has essentially become the receiver. The West is now a primary mission field.
Which completely shatters that old geographic model. We are no longer dealing with a world neatly divided into Christian nations and unreached jungles.
Right. We are dealing with what missiologist Paul Hibert famously called the glocal reality.
Yeah, Hibert's concept is so vital here. He argued that we are living in a postmodern environment.
Which is such a mouthful, postmodern.
It is, but it captures this paradoxical situation where massive global forces like transnational trade, mass migration, instant digital communication, they're all constantly intersecting with highly specific local identities.
So we are globally connected, but human beings still live these intensely local lives.
Right. We speak specific dialects, we have local family structures, we operate within neighborhood moral frameworks.
Okay, my absolute favorite way to visualize this glocal concept from the sources is thinking about a major international airport terminal, like Heathrow or JFK.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Because the old model of missions was taking off from your home airport and landing in a totally isolated, remote village. But the Glocal model is like trying to do ministry inside the terminal itself.
Yeah, where everything is happening all at once.
Exactly. You have a businessman from Tokyo sitting right next to an immigrant family from Brazil, and they're both drinking coffee imported from Ethiopia while scrolling through a social media feed hosted on servers in California.
Everyone is mixing, they're sharing languages, trading ideas. It's constant flux.
Right. And that terminal environment forces us to totally redefine what a missionary actually is today.
You can't just be a geographic pioneer anymore. The
Yeah.
contemporary cross-cultural worker has to be what the sources call an in-betweener.
Okay, I really wrestled with that term when I was reading the source material.
The in-betweener.
Yeah, because an in-betweener sounds incredibly subjective. The idea is that this person acts as a cultural mediator, standing in the gap between the objective revelation of the Bible and the fluid reality of a local culture.
Right.
But if your job is to mediate and interpret at this chaotic global airport, isn't there a massive risk of theological chameleonism?
Oh, for sure.
Like, if we adapt to the culture just so that we can be understood, how do we keep from just mirroring the culture back to itself?
Well, the danger you're pointing out is the exact reason why this requires such rigorous theological framing. The texts emphasize that mediation never implies the authority to alter or dilute divine truth.
Never.
Historic orthodoxy is incredibly clear on the perspicuity and absolute authority of Scripture. You don't change the message to fit the audience.
You are translating, not editing.
Precisely. And a faithful in-betweener is constantly fighting a two-front war against twin errors.
Okay, let's unpack those.
On one flank, you have cultural imperialism.
Right.
This is the arrogant mistake of confusing your specific cultural packaging with the gospel itself. It is insisting that, say, a new convert in rural Kenya has to sing 18th century European hymns accompanied by an organ to truly worship God.
You are basically demanding that they adopt your culture before they can adopt Christ.
Yes. And then on the other flank, you have syncretistic compromise.
The opposite extreme.
Exactly. This is the trap of letting the local pagan beliefs or modern secular philosophies infiltrate and mutate the core doctrines of the faith.
And people usually do that in the name of being relevant.
Always. It's always about relevance.
So we have to find this incredibly razor-thin edge. We have to speak the local language perfectly without absorbing the local idolatry.
It's extremely difficult.
It is. And to understand the mechanics of how that actually works on the ground, we have to turn to Acts 17.
The ultimate case study.
Right. Paul stepping into Athens is the definitive masterclass in global mediation. So let's paint the picture of what Paul is actually walking into around, what, AD 50 or 52?
Yeah, right around the mid-first century. Now, Athens was no longer the geopolitical or military hegemon of the world at that point. Rome held the sword.
Rome was the superpower.
But Athens unequivocally retained its crown as the intellectual, philosophical, and cultural capital of the Greco-Roman world.
It was like the Oxford, the Harvard, and the Paris of antiquity all just rolled into one city.
Exactly. It was a city entirely obsessed with rhetorical brilliance and philosophical debate.
And it was completely, thoroughly saturated with idolatry. I love the historical detail the texts include here about this. The Roman satirist Petronius had this running joke.
Oh, the Petronius quote is so telling.
He joked that it was actually easier to find a god in Athens than a man.
Because the streets were just lined with marble and gold statues to every conceivable deity in the pantheon.
The Greek word Luke uses to describe Paul's observation of the city is keidolen, right?
Keidolen, yes. It literally means under idols or swamped by idols.
Swamped by that.
It conveys this suffocating weight. The entire municipal infrastructure was a monument to pagan worship.
So Paul is walking through this Ivy League city, basically, and he is just surrounded by this suffocating spiritual darkness.
Right.
Now, he engages the Jewish synagogue, which is a standard operating procedure, but he also walks right into the agora, the secular public marketplace, and just starts reasoning with anyone who will talk to him.
Which takes incredible courage.
It really does. And we really need to look at his internal psychological and spiritual state here, because Luke writes that Paul's spirit was provoked within him.
Provoked. That word is translated from the Greek paroxyno.
Paroxyno.
And it is a fierce, visceral term.
It sounds like paroxysm, like a violent outburst.
That's the exact root. In classical literature, and especially in the Greek translation of the Old Testament, it denotes a sharp, piercing irritation or a deep, holy indignation.
So it's not a mild annoyance.
No, it is the exact same language used to describe God's righteous anger when Israel worshipped the golden calf.
Wow. And this is such a crucial distinction for us today. Paul isn't playing the role of the passive, detached tourist here.
Not at all.
He isn't walking past the Parthenon saying, oh, wow, the Doric columns on this temple are structurally magnificent.
I mean, he sees the aesthetic beauty, sure.
Right, he sees it, but he is pierced by the theological tragedy of it. He is grieving over the fact that the glory belonging solely to the Creator is being handed over to carved rocks.
But notice how it channels that paroxyno.
Yeah?
Because missionary indignation that fails to transform into intelligible, loving witness is not Pauline zeal.
It's just a temper tantrum.
Exactly, it's just anger.
Let's hover over that for a second, because this is where I see modern cultural engagement going off the rails constantly.
Oh, daily.
Right. If you or I experience that same holy provocation today, say, you walk onto a radically secular university campus, or you spend 10 minutes reading the ideological vitriol on your social media feed, the natural human reaction is basically either flight or fight.
Yeah, you either withdraw into a holy huddle because the culture is too messy and scary.
Exactly. Or you become an angry internet warrior just lobbing rhetorical grenades from a safe distance behind a keyboard.
But Paul does neither of those things.
No, he engages. He channels his grief into daily, highly intelligent, deeply reasoned dialogue. He loves the glory of God, and he loves these lost Athenians enough to learn their philosophical language and dismantle their worldview from the inside out.
Which is what brings him face to face with the intellectual heavyweights of the city.
The philosophers, right.
He starts drawing a crowd in the marketplace, and he gets cornered by two rival philosophical schools, the Epicureans and the Stoics.
Now, to understand the absolute brilliance of Paul's upcoming speech, we really have to understand what these two groups actually believed.
Yes, because they weren't just ancient historical anomalies. They are the exact same psychological profiles we deal with today.
They really are. So let's break down the Epicureans first.
Well, the Epicureans were fundamentally materialists.
Okay, so their cosmology was entirely physical.
Yes, their entire cosmology was atomistic. They believed the universe consisted solely of physical atoms colliding randomly in an infinite void.
So no divine creator.
No divine creator, no intelligent design, and certainly no immortal soul. When you die, your atoms just disperse back into the universe.
Meaning there is no eternal consequence for anything you do.
Exactly. And because of that materialist framework, their highest ethical goal was ataraxia.
Ataraxia. Meaning what, exactly?
It means the pursuit of tranquility and the total avoidance of pain. Now, they weren't necessarily wild hedonists in the modern sense.
They weren't just partying all the time.
Right. They wanted a modest, highly curated life, free from mental distress or fear of the gods. If they believed the gods existed at all, they thought they lived in total apathy, completely disconnected from human suffering.
So if you think about it, the ancient Epicurean is basically the modern secular materialist.
Totally.
It's the person whose entire life philosophy is essentially, Netflix, comfortable sweatpants, avoid drama, and definitely don't think about death because the universe is just a cosmic accident anyway.
Just seeking a frictionless existence.
Exactly. Just comfort.
That is a very accurate modern parallel. Now, on the other hand, the Stoics were at the complete opposite end of the metaphysical spectrum.
Okay, so if the Epicureans were materialists, what were the Stoics?
They were pantheistic rationalists. They believed the universe wasn't random at all. They thought it was a living, divine organism infused with a rational principle called the logos.
Okay, wait. So for the Stoic, God isn't a personal being who made the world. God is the world.
Right. The cosmos itself is a closed system governed by immutable deterministic fate.
Wow.
Therefore, the goal of human life wasn't to avoid pain like the Epicureans wanted. The goal was to achieve apatheia.
Apatheia, which sounds like apathy.
It's related. It means absolute emotional detachment and self-sufficiency. You were supposed to align your mind with the rational fate of the universe.
So if something terrible happened,
If tragedy strikes, you don't mourn. You endure it with this grim, detached resolve because it was fated by the Logos.
Okay, so this is basically the ancient version of the Silicon Valley tech bro who does dopamine fasts and cold plunges to prove his mind can conquer his body.
Yes. Or the manifesting crowd that believes they are one with the energy of the universe.
Right. So Paul is standing in the middle of these two incredibly arrogant, deeply entrenched worldviews. You've got the materialists who just want comfort, and the pantheists who want complete emotional invulnerability.
And when Paul starts preaching, their immediate reaction is just pure intellectual snobbery.
They just resort to name-calling.
Yeah, they label him a spermologos.
Which I have to say is such a weird, oddly specific insult, a seed picker.
It was an incredibly derogatory piece of Athenian street slang.
Really? Where does it come from?
Well, originally it referred to those little birds that hop around the gutters of the marketplace picking up discarded scraps of seed.
Oh.
Yeah. And then in philosophical circles, it became a metaphor for a hack, a second-rate intellectual scavenger who just picks up random, disconnected scraps of philosophy from other people and tries to pass them off as deep thought without having any coherent system of his own.
So they're essentially calling him a theological plagiarist who doesn't even understand the concepts he's using.
Exactly.
But the irony here is just massive because the Athenians are the ones who don't understand. Paul is preaching the gospel, but the text says they accuse him of being a proclaimer of foreign deities because he was preaching Jesus and the resurrection.
This is a classic failure of cross-cultural communication, and it highlights a critical missiological principle from our sources. Words never travel naked.
Words never travel naked. I love that.
They're always clothed in the worldview of the listener.
So walk us through what actually happened in their heads when Paul used those specific words.
Well, Paul is preaching Isis Jesus and Anastasis resurrection. But the Athenians do not have a Jewish biblical framework for a promised Messiah or a bodily resurrection at the end of history. They process everything through their pagan polytheistic lens.
So when they hear those words,
When they hear the masculine name Isus and the feminine noun Anastasis, they assume Paul is just trying to introduce a new divine couple.
a male god and a female consort.
Yes, a new couple for the Athenian pantheon.
They think he's pitching a new franchise of deities for them to worship.
Pretty much.
That is wild. It just shows you can preach the absolute, unvarnished truth, but if you haven't dismantled the listener's false worldview first, they will just force your truth right into their idolatrous categories.
Which is exactly why the Areopagus address is so brilliant.
Right, so they take Paul from the chaotic marketplace up to the Areopagus, the Hill of Ares.
This is the most prestigious council in Athens. It functioned kind of like a Supreme Court of morals and religion.
So they were the ones who vetted new ideas.
Right, they were responsible for visiting lecturers and ensuring that new ideas didn't threaten the social order.
So Paul is no longer just casually debating in the square. This is a formal inquiry. He is surrounded by the intellectual elite of the empire, men who have already dismissed him as a babbling bird.
And he has to completely rebuild their understanding of reality from the ground up.
And he has to do it without quoting the Old Testament, because a Stoic doesn't care what Isaiah or Moses said.
Exactly. He cannot rely on biblical authority as his starting premise. So instead, he employs what the texts call a metacultural framework.
Okay, let's dig into that.
He starts with a brilliant piece of diplomatic observation. He stands up and says, "Men of Athens, I perceive that in every way you are very religious."
The Greek term there is deus aidaimonesteros. And it's a highly calculated word choice, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah.
It is functionally ambiguous. It can mean devout in a positive sense, or it can mean superstitious in a very negative sense.
So he's not validating them, but he's not immediately insulting them either.
Right. He uses it as a neutral hook. He is acknowledging their undeniable spiritual hunger without validating the object of their worship. He is establishing a point of contact.
And his physical point of contact is an altar he found while walking through the city dedicated to the unknown god Agnostotheo.
Agnostotheo, yeah.
I was reading the background on this, and it's just fascinating. If an ancient city was struck by a plague or a famine, and they sacrificed to Zeus, Athena, and Apollo, and the plague didn't stop, they would panic.
Right. They would assume they missed someone.
Exactly. They would assume there was some obscure, unnamed deity they had offended. So they would build altars to unknown gods just to cover their bases. It was literally a theological insurance policy.
Which reveals the deep anxiety built into paganism.
Yeah.
Can never be sure you've pleased all the gods.
Never.
So Paul looks at this monument to their spiritual anxiety and uses it to expose their self-confessed ignorance. He essentially says, this God whose identity you admit you do not know, but whom you are desperately trying to appease, I am now going to officially introduce him to you.
And from there, Paul unleashes just a masterclass in philosophical deconstruction.
He starts with theology proper. He declares that this God is the creator of the world and everything in it, the Lord of heaven and earth.
And with that one sentence, he completely decapitates both the Epicurean and Stoic worldviews.
Yes, he does.
Because by defining God as the sovereign creator of matter, he destroys the Epicurean idea of a random atomistic universe.
Right. And by defining God as the transcendent Lord who is distinct from the world, he destroys the Stoic idea that God and the universe are the same thing.
He perfectly separates the creator from the creation, and then he moves to this concept of divine aseity.
Aseity is so critical here.
Right. He looks at all these magnificent marble temples surrounding the hill, and he says, the God who made the world does not live in shrines made by man, nor is he served by human hands as though he needed anything.
Divine aseity is the doctrine of God's absolute self-existence and self-sufficiency.
Meaning God doesn't need us.
Exactly. Pagan religion, at its core, is a transaction. It is a reciprocal economy. The worshiper brings food, incense, or blood to the temple to feed and sustain the god.
And in return, the god dispenses favors.
Right. A good harvest, a military victory, whatever.
It's basically a cosmic bribery system. You manage the god by meeting his needs.
But Paul flips the entire dynamic on its head. He says God doesn't need your meat or your temples. He is the one who gives life, breath, and everything else to all mankind.
The creature does not sustain the creator sustains the creature.
Which renders the entire municipal infrastructure of Athens philosophically absurd.
Completely absurd. Why are you building a house for the architect of the cosmos? Why are you trying to feed the source of life? It's completely illogical once you understand who God actually is.
And then Paul twists the knife a little deeper.
Oh, he goes right for their anthropology.
Yes, their understanding of human origins. He introduces divine monogenism.
Meaning one origin.
Right. He states that God made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, having determined allotted periods and the boundaries of their dwelling place.
Now, this might be the most offensive thing he could have said to an Athenian audience.
Unquestionably.
Because the Athenians were fiercely proud of a concept called autochthony.
Right. They genuinely believed that they didn't migrate from somewhere else. They believed their ancestors literally sprang up from the sacred soil of Attica.
They thought they were born from the earth itself. It was the foundational myth of their racial and cultural supremacy.
They divided the entire world into two categories, the enlightened Greeks and the uneducated barbarians. They believed they were essentially a different, superior species.
So Paul is standing in front of the most arrogant intellectuals on the planet, and he calmly informs them that they share the exact same biological and spiritual ancestry from one single man, Adam, as every single barbarian they despise.
It is a devastating critique of ethnocentrism.
He strips them of their cultural supremacy. He tells them they don't control human history. God determines the rise and fall of nations, and God draws the borders on the map.
Paul establishes that no human culture operates autonomously. Every society, including glorious Athens, exists entirely under the sovereign providence of God.
And the purpose of this providence, Paul says, is that humans should seek God in the hope that they might feel their way toward him and find him.
And here is where Paul executes what I think is the most brilliant rhetorical maneuver in the New Testament.
Oh, this is my favorite part. He doesn't quote scripture to prove his point.
No.
He uses their own pop culture against them. He cites two pagan Greek poets. First, Epimenides, in him we live and move and have our being,
Right.
and then Aratus, for we are indeed his offspring. Now, we need to be really careful here because Paul is not endorsing pagan poetry as divinely inspired revelation, is he?
Absolutely not. He is employing an argumentum ad hominem, which basically means arguing from the opponent's own premises to show the fatal inconsistency of their worldview.
It's an incredibly sophisticated apologetic tactic.
It really is. He is saying, let's look at your own celebrated literature. Your own cultural prophets instinctively recognize a profound dependency on a supreme being.
Yeah.
They admit that human beings are the offspring of the divine.
And then he springs the trap.
He does.
He argues, if we are God's offspring, if we are living, breathing, rational creatures endowed with a moral agency, how completely irrational is it to think that the divine being is like a piece of gold or silver or stone carved by the imagination of a human artist?
It exposes the ultimate irony of idolatry. Because if humanity comes from God, then humanity is higher than inanimate matter.
Right.
Therefore, for a human to bow down to a rock he carved himself is a grotesque inversion of reality. The creature is attempting to manufacture the creator in its own image.
Wow.
Paul uses their own poetic tradition to demonstrate that their idolatrous practices are intellectually bankrupt.
He completely unmasks the foolishness of their system, and he does it using their own vocabulary. But as we know, philosophical deconstruction is not salvation.
No, cultural analysis is just clearing the rubble.
Right. At some point, the cross-cultural mediator actually has to deliver the gospel. And this brings us to the climax of the speech, where the tone completely shifts from philosophical observation to a direct divine ultimatum.
Yes. Acts 17.30 marks a massive, redemptive historical pivot.
Yeah.
Paul says, the times of ignorance God overlooked, but now he commands all people everywhere to repent.
The times of ignorance God overlooked. The word overlooked, they're the Greek participle hyperidon that requires some careful theological handling, doesn't it?
It really does. It does not mean God gave the pagan world a free pass.
It's not divine amnesty.
No, not at all. It denotes redemptive historical forbearance. As Paul argued in Romans 1, all humanity is without excuse because the invisible attributes of God are clearly perceived in creation.
Right, everyone knows God exists.
But for centuries, God allowed the Gentile nations to walk in their own ways. He withheld the explicit worldwide summons of the gospel. He was incredibly patient. But Paul announces that this era of forbearance is officially over.
The word now changes everything.
It does.
The incarnation, the cross, and the resurrection have inaugurated a totally new age, and the command is uncompromising. All people, everywhere, must repent.
This is a direct, unavoidable confrontation with what we would call today theological pluralism.
The idea that all religious traditions are equally valid paths up the same mountain.
Exactly. Paul does not say, oh, your altar to the unknown God is a beautiful expression of local spirituality. Let me just add Jesus to your current journey.
Right, like Jesus is just a life coach to help you self-actualize.
No, he identifies their entire religious system as culpable ignorance, and he demands a radical, comprehensive turning away from it.
It's not an invitation to religious self-improvement. It's a command from the sovereign of the universe. And he grounds the urgency of this command in eschatology.
Yes, the final judgment.
He says, God has fixed a day on which he will judge the world in righteousness by a man whom he has appointed.
And that completely shatters the Epicurean illusion that there are no consequences after death.
And it shatters the Stoic illusion of an impersonal, cyclical universe.
Exactly. History is linear, and it is moving inexorably toward a fixed, unalterable day of absolute moral accountability. The Creator who gave them breath is returning as the judge who will demand an account.
And who is the judge? It's not a concept. It's a specific appointed man. And Paul offers the ultimate, unassailable proof that this is going to happen. He says God has given assurance or proof to all men by raising this man from the dead.
The term for proof there is pistis, used here in its legal sense, meaning a guarantee or convincing evidence.
So it's not a blind leap of faith?
No, Paul doesn't appeal to a subjective spiritual feeling. He points to an objective historical space-time event. The bodily resurrection of Jesus Christ is the cosmic validation that he has the authority to judge the living and the dead.
But, you know, if we pause here and put ourselves in Paul's shoes for a second, this seems like a massive tactical arrow based on modern church growth logic.
It really does.
Because if you are trying to win over the intellectual elite, you don't drop a theological bomb that you know they're going to hate. And the Greeks absolutely hated the concept of a physical resurrection.
Oh, they despised it. To the Hellenistic mind, deeply influenced by Platonic dualism, the physical body was an anchor. It was a prison for the rational soul.
The physical world was bad, the spiritual world was good.
Right. The entire goal of philosophy and religion was to liberate the soul from the gross materiality of the flesh.
So salvation meant escaping the body, not getting it back forever.
Exactly. The concept of incarnation, that the divine logos would permanently assume physical flesh, suffer a bloody execution, and then be bodily resurrected into eternity, was totally offensive. It was intellectually repulsive to them.
So why didn't Paul just soften it?
Right. Why not accommodate?
Yeah, why didn't he just talk about the spirit of Jesus living on in our hearts, or frame the resurrection as a beautiful metaphor for springtime and renewal? Why force this offensive, literal bodily resurrection down their throats at the very climax of the speech?
Because Paul knew that a gospel without the physical resurrection of Christ is a false gospel.
Amen.
He refused to sacrifice theological orthodoxy on the altar of cultural palatability. He perfectly contextualized the delivery of the message using their language, their altars, their poets.
Yeah.
But he absolutely refused to alter the content of the message.
Even when he knew it would trigger their deepest philosophical prejudices.
Even then.
And the reaction of the crowd completely proves it. When he mentions the resurrection of the dead, the text says we see three distinct responses. First, outright rejection. Some mocked him.
The intellectuals sneered at the absurdity of a dead Jewish carpenter coming back to life.
The second response is procrastination. Others said, we will hear you again about this.
It is intellectual curiosity, totally devoid of moral commitment. It's the ancient equivalent of saying, fascinating TED Talk, Paul. I'll bookmark it and watch it later.
Exactly. But the third response is the one that validates the entire mission. Conversion. The text specifically highlights Dionysius the Areopagite, a member of that very elite, intimidating council, and a woman named Damaris and others with them who joined Paul and believed.
And this is the bedrock of Reformed missiology.
Huh.
We do not measure the success of cultural mediation by universal applause or massive crowd retention.
Right.
If Paul had watered down the message to keep the Epicureans happy, Dionysius might not have heard the true gospel. Success is measured by faithful, uncompromising proclamation. We do the translating. God the Holy Spirit does the regenerating.
Which perfectly sets up the final theological point the texts want us to grasp today. We've been talking about the missionary as a glocal mediator, an in-betweener, but we have to recognize the severe limits of our mediation. We are merely secondary, derivative mediators.
Yes. A human missionary can mediate understanding. We can bridge linguistic gaps, we can dismantle false worldviews using local logic, and we can build relational bridges.
But no human being can mediate saving grace.
Never. We cannot bridge the infinite moral chasm between a holy God and a rebellious sinner.
That role belongs exclusively to Jesus Christ. He is the ultimate Messiah, the true and only mediator.
The incarnation itself is the ultimate act of mediation. The eternal Son of God assumed human nature, perfectly uniting deity and humanity in one person, without confusion or mixture.
He perfectly reveals the unknown God to humanity.
Yes,
Yeah.
and through his active obedience, his substitutionary death, and his victorious resurrection, he reconciles humanity to God.
So what does all of this mean for you and me, the modern church? How do we apply this Acts 17 blueprint to our glocal digital reality today?
Well, the sources suggest this is a mandate to reject the two extremes we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
We have to reject cultural imperialism.
Right. We can't demand that people adopt Western political structures or American cultural habits to follow Jesus.
But equally, and perhaps more pressingly in our current moment, we must violently reject syncretism. We cannot dilute the exclusivity of Christ, the reality of sin, the necessity of repentance, or the certainty of judgment just to make the gospel fit neatly into modern therapeutic frameworks or secular ideologies.
We have to view our local communities, our neighborhoods, the international students at the local university, the immigrants in our city as complex, glocal mission fields. We need to learn their language and understand their altars.
And this absolutely applies to the digital space, which is perhaps the most dangerous glocal marketplace of all.
The texts offer a very sharp warning about digital communication, don't they?
They do. Because the internet erases geographic boundaries instantly, it is incredibly easy for churches to export their hyperlocal cultural controversies, political tribalism, and theological infighting to the rest of the world.
And we end up mistaking that noise for the gospel.
Exactly. We end up confusing believers in other contexts by forcing them to navigate American culture wars rather than anchoring them in the historic confessions of the faith.
That is such a vital warning. We treat the global church like a massive content audience to be monetized rather than a covenant community to be shepherded.
Right. But if we follow Paul's model, we do the hard work of understanding the specific worldview of the person across from us.
Whether they are sitting in a coffee shop in Seattle or interacting with us on a server in Singapore.
Exactly. We find their altars to unknown gods. We use their own logical inconsistencies to expose their need. and then we courageously point them to the empty tomb.
It requires immense theological precision
Profound cultural empathy.
and an absolute reliance on the sovereign grace of God to open blind eyes.
It is the ultimate tightrope walk. But Acts 17 proves it can be done.
It does. We started this journey today talking about the overwhelming, chaotic noise of the modern digital Times Square we all live in. We saw how the map of missions has shifted from crossing oceans to crossing the street or just crossing the digital divide.
And we watched Paul step into the ancient equivalent of that chaos in Athens, deeply grieved but intellectually engaged.
We saw him brilliantly dismantle the illusions of the materialists and the pantheists, completely rewrite their understanding of reality, and boldly declare the resurrected Christ as the judge of the world.
A true masterclass.
It really is. So here is the final thought I want to leave you with as you step back into your own Glocal reality this week. You don't have to travel to first century Greece to find the Areopagus.
No, you don't.
It's in your corporate break room. It's in your university lecture hall. It is absolutely embedded in the algorithms of your social media feeds. Look closely at the world around you over the next few days. What are the modern altars to unknown gods that your friends and neighbors are desperately sacrificing their time, their money, and their mental health to appease?
What are the secular illusions they're hiding behind?
And more importantly, when you see those altars, do you feel that holy provocation? And do you have the courage to step into the marketplace, learn their language, and tell them the truth about the God who gives them breath? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive on Reformed thinking.